Hi, I'm Danny Duchamp, welcome to my Shitting on the Fit. So today I'm going to be responding to a YouTuber by the name of Dr. Layman. The video in question is about the free and open marketplace of ideas. His position, as he describes it at a couple of times in the video, is that it doesn't exist. Free and open marketplace of ideas don't real. I want to get off the bat by saying that's a pretty weird way of putting his position, because he's not saying that, oh, there's too much government censorship, or there's too much cultural censorship, and therefore the free and open marketplace of ideas can't work as intended. He's simply saying that he doesn't think that currently the free and open marketplace of ideas, to the extent that it is real, results in better ideas. Right, he doesn't think that people being able to freely express their ideas, and various people being able to receive and judge those ideas, results in ideas broadly improving, which it's wrong, and I'm going to explain why that's the case, but it also doesn't mean that the free and open marketplace of ideas doesn't exist. So I just wanted to point out that weird phrasing. In any case, the video in question is about 4 weeks old at this point, and I wasn't going to do a response to it, but then I did a poll on my Twitter, and it seems like half of my followers are in agreement, at least with the bold statement that he made. It's a little bit worrying. I didn't think that the ideas that Dr. Layman was putting forward would be so successful in the free and open marketplace of ideas that he doesn't believe in. But I guess they have been. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through bits and pieces of his video. I won't play the entire thing, and I'm just going to respond to it point by point. So first of all, I want him to give the definition that he's working with in this video so that we don't strawman him in any way. Go ahead, Dr. Layman.
By now, especially on the internet, the definition seems to have been simplified a bit to basically mean if you talk openly and honestly about ideas with no restrictions, ideas will be judged on their merit and only quote-unquote good ideas will prevail.
So yeah, that's correct, I would say, but the free and open marketplace of ideas isn't reliant on good in that definition, meaning the ones that are better for humanity or the ones that are more true, just as the best traits in organisms in the marketplace of genetics that we call natural selection don't have to be the ones that are best for the organism. They just have to be the traits that survive somehow. You know, there can be traits that organisms have that actually are detrimental to the survival of that organism in particular, but they help the gene survive, perhaps by that particular organism sacrificing itself for other members of its species, and thus having those genes mean that it will be in a species that has other organisms of the same species sacrificing themselves for it. Also, another example would be where this analogy comes from, the free and open marketplace of, well, the marketplace. The products that succeed in the free and open marketplace of stuff don't have to necessarily be the ones that are best for people in any necessary sense, right? They don't have to be the ones that people won't regret buying. They just have to be the ones that people will choose to buy. Now, you could argue that from like a praxeological standpoint that is still best for people, but in that sense I mentioned before, that they won't regret them, it isn't necessarily. The ideas that get accepted, just the same as the genes that get accepted and the products that get accepted, won't necessarily be the best ones for people, but they will be the best ones out there. They will be the best ones that at getting themselves accepted. I mean, it's almost tautological in that sense. That being said, I would make the claim that the free and open marketplace of ideas does result in generally improving sets of ideas. So even though I'm sort of disagreeing with Layman's kind of definition of the idea that the free and open marketplace of ideas doesn't exist, I would still, I'd still be willing to go head-to-head on that concept that he's really getting at, which is that the free and open marketplace of ideas won't necessarily result in improving ideas generally. So yeah, with all that said, I want to move along to the basic claim that he's making about the free and open marketplace of ideas, which he does outline in a bit more of a coherent way in this next clip.
The absolute vast majority of all models of communication, decision-making and attitude change go against the notion of accepting ideas based entirely or even largely on their merit, and as such they go against the marketplace of ideas working as intended.
Okay, so that's essentially the claim, that the open marketplace of ideas doesn't result in improving ideas because there are all of these cognitive biases and other various ways in which we accept ideas on things other than their merits. That all of these things outweigh the accepting ideas on their merits part of our psychology, and therefore the free and open marketplace of ideas may well result in worsening ideas. I am going to disagree with this, but first I want to start talking about the specific pieces of evidence he has for this. So go ahead, Layman.
So let's just jump right in and start with one of the many factors in decision-making, group mentality. Let's just focus on one piece of empirical research that was presented in that video, group consensus decision-making. They basically put a large group of people into a room and observed how those people moved. The findings were really interesting. When they introduced a number of planted leaders, meaning people that were in on the experiment and that were instructed to direct the other people, those leaders were able to direct the movement of the masses. There was no verbal or non-verbal communication, except the leaders appearing to be confident in their decision. Unconsciously, most participants followed them.
And the 190 other ones, they don't know that leaders are present here in this experiment. So they think they're just going for a walk in this hall. And so you can see in the video here, the leaders quickly accumulate here at the front, and then they initiate a movement here in this direction towards the target location. So this worked quite well with 5% of the group. And if we dramatically reduce the number of leaders, they could not do it anymore.
Group mentality. Okay, this is a sort of a cognitive bias that is going to potentially reduce your ability to determine the better ideas. When I say better in this context, I mean truer, more representative of reality. However, in this case, it doesn't really seem to. Those people are just moving around that room for arbitrary reasons. There's nothing irrational about keeping with the group. Maybe they want to stay with the group. There's no target that they're moving to, and there's nothing irrational that they're actually doing in that case. So, yeah, those people are behaving perfectly rationally. That being said, the next example that Layman brings up does actually result in some irrational behavior through group mentality. So let's skip ahead to that.
To put it short, you have two cards. One card shows a one line, another card shows several lines. Find the matching lines. In a group of people, everyone gives his or her answer one after the other. The catch? All but one person were controlled agents, giving predetermined wrong answers on purpose. While admittedly the majority of people stuck with their own perception, 63%, a whopping 36% of all participants changed their answers.
Okay, so this one is a much better example of people being irrational via group mentality, thus potentially providing a reason that the free and open marketplace of ideas would actually result in worse ideas, not better. However, there are a couple of problems with this. The first one is, there is some justification in taking into account other people's judgments when making yours. I mean, let's say you're in that room and you're not feeling too confident, you're usually bad at these sorts of brain teasers where the answer seems oh so obvious, and everyone around you is saying, oh, the answer's clearly A. Well, it's not entirely irrational to say, well, I've been wrong about this kind of shit before, I'm just going to go with the group. When the question is so clear and obvious like this, I would say that it is pretty irrational, at least for the majority of people. But then, the majority of people didn't get swayed by the group. Like you said, the majority of people were able to select the correct answer. Now, you might say that, well, if the question was a little bit trickier, then more people would have been swayed by group mentality. I mean, if you're not implying that, then this is a terrible example. This is an example where the majority of people are willing to buck group mentality in order to pick the correct answer. This is a fantastic triumph of the free and open marketplace of ideas. I mean, no concept of the free and open marketplace of ideas would require everyone to constantly judge every idea perfectly, just that people would generally judge them correctly, even overcoming their biases, which this is an example of people doing. But, like I say, if you're implying that given a slightly more difficult situation, people would be more likely to be swayed by group mentality into the wrong answer, then okay. But let's consider that hypothetical, because that still allows for a successful free and open marketplace of ideas. What that essentially means is that people will go along with the group in general, and some small percentage of people will change their minds in response to the evidence and go against the grain of the group. Now, that actually doesn't result in a loss of the free marketplace of ideas. What that means is that there's only a small minority of people who are really engaging in it and are really going to be those leaders, like from the first study where people were moving around the room, will be those leaders that are pulling people in different directions. What you've shown here is something that's been known in marketing for quite a while. There's a TED talk by, can't remember his name, I'll put it up on screen. He talks about how the best place to target your marketing is not at the majority of people, but to the fringes where there are nerds and weirdos who are willing to go against the grain because they are the only people who will change their minds and thus pull public opinion towards them. I'll play a little clip from that talk just so you can get a general idea of what I'm talking about.
I think the strategy you want to use is to not market to these people because they're really good at ignoring you, but market to these people because they care. These are the people who are obsessed with something. And when you talk to them, they'll listen because they like listening. It's about them. And if you're lucky, they'll tell their friends on the rest of the curve. It'll spread through the entire curve.
So yeah, essentially, Layman, what you've shown there is not that the free and open marketplace of ideas isn't resulting in a progressively improving set of ideas. What you've shown is that it's only the nerds and the freaks and the weirdos who are the ones who you should actually be arguing with, that everyone else will go along with them. All that means is those people who are actually willing to change their minds, the people who are really going to be engaging, those people actually have a far larger effect. Let me spell this out clearly. What you've shown here is that one of the most noble and positive pursuits you can imagine is arguing with random autists on the internet. And academics and things like that. But yeah, autists on the internet are definitely the sorts of people who are going to be willing to change their minds and thus pull public opinion in their direction, like the group leader folks you were talking about before. Anyway, I think we've got a couple more clips that I was going to go through. What was the next one? Oh yes, so next you're going to talk about a more important issue where people are changing their minds or not based on a debate. And I don't think it shows what you think it shows. Let's play the clip.
Proponents of the marketplace of ideas seem to love debates because, in their understanding, the better ideas will inevitably win. Well, spoiler, the merit of ideas is not really relevant.
Not really relevant. Oh, I sure hope you're not about to very quickly contradict yourself on that.
To put it bluntly, as long as both candidates are doing an acceptable job, Group A will consistently think that their candidate won and the opposing candidate lost, while Group B will consistently think that their candidate won and the opposing candidate lost. This phenomenon has been observed consistently, and it pretty much clearly suggests that as long as your favorite candidate is doing somewhat okayish, you probably won't have your mind changed at all. Again, a really wonky base for a working marketplace of ideas.
Okay, let's be clear about what you just described there, Layman. You described people being willing to change their ideas when the evidence is strong enough. I understand that you might say, well, they should be willing to change their minds even when the evidence is only just barely strong enough that it would be rational to switch from one side to the other. And maybe, but the open marketplace of ideas will still result in an ever-improving set of ideas if there's just some impetus for a true idea to be accepted over a false one, right? Like, provided that a true idea, by virtue of being true, has a better chance of survival in that marketplace than a false one, then maybe it won't be instant, maybe it won't be super fast, but the open marketplace of ideas will still have a gradually improving set of ideas. Now, additionally, it's kind of rational that people would need a complete knockout argument to switch from one position to another. You see, when you agree with someone, you agree with some political candidate or a philosopher, someone debating something, then you probably have some huge set of philosophical and ideological positions in common with them, with a whole lot of justifying arguments. You probably have some big set of, well, some ideology set up to justify all of these positions. And even if the opposing candidate defeats your candidate on all of the grounds that are presented in the debate, that doesn't necessarily mean that they completely demolish the opposing position. You know, not every part of the ideology is going to be presented in that debate, and therefore the candidate you support, you may still think, well, they're right, they just didn't present all of the ideas that are necessary to justify the position that we know is right. And that's perfectly valid, perfectly rational. Only when there is a complete and utter demolishing of that position is it truly rational to switch from one side to the other. Another thing I want to point out here is that people will often improve their ideas, but not accept that their enemy is the one that convinced them to do so. Essentially, if you present information to someone, you teach someone something in a very combative way, they often will accept it, but they won't accept that you convinced them. There's some evidence for this. You guys know Veritasium, the YouTube channel? Well, the guy Derek who runs it, he did his PhD on this exact subject. Instead of describing his study myself, I'll let him describe it to you.
I went to the University of Sydney and I took all the first-year physics students and I tried to teach them about the basic laws of motion, Newton's first and second laws. I asked them to go online and sit a 26-question multiple-choice test. We would get the students to rate their confidence in their answers. How confident are you that this is correct? And then I would randomly assign these students to watch one of several videos about Newton's first and second laws. So in a standard exposition video, I would say something like this to them. Well, we would state Newton's laws, and then we would apply it to a real-world example, like a juggler. Okay, so after watching this video, the students would sit the exact same 26-question test. I wanted to see, had they changed their minds about any of those questions? And I also interviewed a couple students to see what did they think about the video. Did they like it? Did they think that they learned something from it? And here's what they told me. Well, they said, Derek, that was a great video. It was clear. These are the most common things they said. It was clear, it was concise, it was easy to understand. And then I looked at their confidence scores. How did that change on average? Well, on average, it improved by about a point. Okay, everything's looking good, but how much did they learn? Well, on the pre-test, they scored 6 out of 26. The average on the post-test was 6.3. What happened? They thought they learned, but their scores didn't change. So how do you get students to engage? Well, I tried a different approach. I put 2 people in a video, and I got one to voice the common misconceptions. And then the tutor would kind of indicate, okay, that's not quite right, and they would work it out. Okay, so this was the very same setting that the other students watched the exposition video. What did the dialogue students say? Well, no one told me that it was clear. No one told me it was concise. No one said it was easy to understand. In fact, most of the time, they told me it was confusing. Man, maybe this backfired. So how'd they go on the post-test? Well, their scores nearly doubled to 11 out of 26. Okay, it's not 26 out of 26, but it's a start.
So yeah, a combative method of teaching people things, treating education more like a debate, is actually a very good way of teaching them. They won't accept that your teaching was good because they're pissed at you because you said, here's your idea, here's why it's dumb, you're dumb, stop being dumb. But they will be humiliated into changing their perspectives. I mean, it should be quite obvious when you think about it. If people want to avoid humiliation, what they're going to do when they encounter someone who defeated their ideas is A, not accept that that happened, but B, never make the same mistakes again, because they don't want to be humiliated again. So that's essentially the way that the free and open marketplace of ideas can improve people's ideas, even when they aren't accepting the fact that that's happening. Okay, so the next thing that you want to talk about is that while you don't think that the free and open marketplace of ideas is working as intended now, you think that there are some things we could do to get that to happen.
A working, open marketplace of ideas, of this survival of the fittest when it comes to ideas and ideologies, is something that sounds amazing. I unironically wish it was true. I genuinely do, but the sad truth is, shit floats to the top. If you look at the most watched YouTube videos, TV series, most read books or listened to music, most popular politicians and political parties, would you say those are truly the best? The same is also true for ideas. In this video we went over all sorts of human decision making, and I just can't see how on earth the open marketplace of ideas is supposed to work under these conditions. So does that mean that we should just stop with the open marketplace of ideas and just start deplatforming each other, silencing each other, and trying to win with the most underhanded tactics that we can? Not really, but the thing is, we have to acknowledge our own biases. We have to acknowledge the way that our brains work. We have to acknowledge the way decisions work. And I very often don't see people do this.
Okay, so first of all, people do already do these things that you're requesting that they do, you know, working on their biases. they may not be doing it intentionally. I mean, a lot of the time they are, but even when they're not, they in fact do work on these biases. The way that this happens is via a concept that's commonly known as thinking tools. There's a philosopher, Daniel Dennett, who I quite like, who talks about how these thinking tools are probably the thing responsible for the Flynn effect. The way that, despite no real possibility for a genetic increase in IQ, our IQ tests have managed to, well, we have to keep changing the IQ test so the average is 100. We have to keep making it harder and harder, otherwise the average wouldn't be 100 anymore. Yeah, so people have been constantly getting smarter despite there being not enough time for that to be a genetic thing. And in fact, if there is any genetic bias, it's towards dumber people. I mean, smarter people tend to have less kids. So the increase in intelligence is largely considered to be down to these thinking tools. There are things like a win-win situation, right? You learn what a win-win situation is, and then when you come into some other kind of situation, you can think, oh, is this a win-win situation? Is there a way for both sides to benefit from this? The converse of that would be a zero-sum game, another thinking tool. I can look at a new situation and say, is this really a zero-sum game? Percentages. All of these things are things that a long time ago we would not have had. It would have been some arcane piece of knowledge, the idea of a percentage. But because these things help us think, they are used to improve our ability to discriminate bad ideas from good ones. Now, the point that I want to bring up here is primarily that a lot of these thinking tools are directly aimed at combating biases. The most obvious one being just knowing what fallacies are. Right, like a straw man, for example. I know a lot of people misuse the concept, but a lot of people don't, right? The concept of a straw man is much more widely known now than it used to be, because it's been a useful thinking tool that's helped people to improve reduce their susceptibility to these cognitive biases. There are just lots of things that people constantly learn and are disseminated throughout the population that improve their ability to think. Now, a thing I want to go back to is that the free and open marketplace of ideas works even without these constant improvements to our ability to overcome our biases, right? So the free and open marketplace of ideas will just require that a good idea is better equipped to survive than a bad one. Now, a good idea may be the commonly held position, and therefore you're more likely to believe that idea, or a bad idea might be the commonly held position. The fact that we are biased towards holding the commonly held position is not something that benefits the bad idea over the good one, it's just something that benefits arbitrary ideas. So therefore the ideas will constantly improve, because, just to be clear again, the good ideas can benefit from all those cognitive biases just as much as the bad ideas, but the bad ideas can't benefit from the positive things about being a good idea. The only way you can actually destroy the free and open marketplace of ideas is by specifically instilling some ideas, some bad ones, with the ability to cheat that system. One good way would be to make it illegal to believe otherwise. The only way you can defeat that free and open marketplace of ideas is giving the bad ideas the ability to cheat, and provided we don't do that, then even if our cognitive biases will make it a slower progress, the better ideas are still going to win out. It's really common, I think, to confuse pessimism with realism, and it's not the same thing. Some things are better than you think. And one of those things is people's ability to look towards good ideas than bad ideas. And some evidence I would like to present for this is all of history. Now, you might say, well, people have gotten better and worse at their ideas, like they've gone up and down, and yes, they have. But in general, have the broad ideas across all populations improved or declined? I would say clearly they've improved. I mean, look at all the technology we have around us. That requires really good ideas to be prominent. I mean, look at our sort of political philosophy. I'd say that has also improved, although a lot of people are going to disagree with me there. But in general, the point is, our society has progressed massively, and the only difference between us now and us 100,000 years ago are the ideas in our heads. The genes have not changed that much. It's the ideas. So if we have these better ideas now, and we used to have worse ones, clearly there is something about good ideas that allows them to survive better than bad ones. The free and open marketplace of ideas does exist, does work, It's not perfect, but we're improving on it all the time by improving our thinking tools. Okay, yeah, no, I'm done. Right, get out of my shitty Honda Fit. Bye.